From Ticker, this is Brand Builders with Trevor Young.
Hey, welcome back to Brand Builders here on Ticker. We are broadcasting remotely today, and we're talking all about communicating in a crisis. And obviously, we've got the COVID-19 health outbreak crisis that we're all very much aware of. So we're talking about communications. We've just had Mark Schenk on from Anecdote International, and now we're going to be chatting with Ben Hart, who runs an agency called Fireside. And Ben is a media and communications advisor. He's worked in government, and prior to setting up Fireside, he was Chief of Staff to Sally Capp, who is the Lord Mayor of Melbourne. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Ben, so you're working from home as well. Good to see. Mate, let's talk about being able to communicate. I said at the top of the show that, good communication is valuable and important at any stage, but particularly at the moment. And lots of businesses have got lots of different audiences to communicate with. Let's just get into this in a conversational style. What are some? Let's go through some things that business leaders and owners and entrepreneurs need to be aware of.
Yeah, well, I think this is, and I think there's a lot of, parallels here with our personal lives as well. Obviously, we're all being stretched and tested and forced to do things in a different way. And that can be difficult, but that can also be an opportunity for people to really think about what their purpose is and what their kind of foundational story is, whether they're going through a COVID-related kind of crisis or just causing them business difficulties. These kind of situations are opportunities for us to really go back to the idea of story as a foundational element that really sort of protects us going forward, and something that we should really think about even now, how we can preserve that when this all ends, because this is an opportunity to really look at best practice in terms of, what is your story? Do you know what your story is? Is your story something that's going to protect you in difficult times? This is a chance to really delve into that.
So I guess what you're saying too, from what I'm hearing, is that, if you've really got your story in place anyway, this is just a continuation of your communications, and, part of telling your story is knowing your audiences and that side of things. But if you haven't gone down that path, there's a few things that you should be looking at. Explain your foundational story. How would you take people through that?
Well, so what we do at Fireside, we're primarily around helping people develop their story and then giving them advice and, even getting on the tools to help them, create the content and deliver it through the right channels. And what we do is we use a method that was developed by a Harvard academic called Marshall Gantz, who talks about his theory of public narrative. What that is a story of self, story of us, and story of now. So story of self is what is my experience, how, and self can be either yourself as a business person or your company. How did I start? What is my purpose? How do I exist in the world? What do I bring to my customers? Story of us is then the collective experience. So that's when you actually really connect with people and say, how are we all in this together? What kind of values do we share? What kind of goals and purposes do we share? And then you've really got people emotionally, and that then leads you to story of now. And that's really when you're asking them to take an action or do something that they otherwise wouldn't do, and do it now. So, this can, be really useful in a normal business context, but this is going to be even more valuable now when you're really asking people to pay attention to you in a very, very crowded, noisy environment, and also asking them to trust you.
And you've said the word emotion, and Mark also alluded to that as well. And obviously a key theme. I mean, it's a very emotional time, and just being hard and rational and practical might not work. We need to sort of appeal to people's emotions a bit more of the empathy and the heart stuff, the stuff about the heart, maybe.
Oh, exactly. And I know that Mark used the toilet paper example, and that's a pretty good way to go into to any kind of situation at the moment. And I will use some political analogies here because I think that's what everyone is kind of watching as well. And like we look at how the Prime Minister dealt with the toilet runs on toilet paper, and saying, just stop it now. I mean, I went to the supermarket yesterday, and the shelves are still empty. So clearly, that's not working. And I think that's not working because nobody likes to have someone pointing their finger at them and making them feel like they've been bad or naughty, and that doesn't actually change behaviour. It reminded me of being told off by my dad when I was a kid. And I think a much better way to do it is to say, um, employing empathy in that kind of situation to change behaviour, to say, listen, I know that you're scared. I know that you are worried that this vital resource for everyone isn't going to we're not going to be able to keep on providing this for you, but actually it's going to be okay. And I understand your fear, but please do the right thing by people, because there are old people and people in need who are really missing out on vital things at the moment because everyone's being acting on their fears and not thinking about their collective good. So really going as a business, if you can go back to empathy, really put yourself in the shoes of your customers, really think about the we. So how are we joined? Because we are all in this together. And, if there's anything that this situation is telling us, it's that, we are all connected, and we are all in exactly the same situation. And if you can actually harness that we to actually change behaviour, you're actually so far ahead of the pack, I think.
Walk a mile in other people's shoes.
Exactly.
But also being able to communicate that as well. I mean, it's across the multiple channels. I guess the Prime Minister has the floor, has the lectern, and the media rolling up to his front door. But for business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs, they've got to use a multitude of tools at their disposal. Things like, is video more effective? I know I was talking with Mark about this as well, and sometimes, I mean, we've got to use all of the tools, and email is probably an obvious one just to reach everyone. But I think that sometimes if we want to get that emotion through, it's hard to write. It's a lot harder to write emotionally, I think, than doing it through maybe video or audio in some way.
Well, I mean, definitely in terms of own media, the video is short, sharp, punchy videos are the best ways to communicate through your own channels at the moment. If you can get that right, I think it's obviously it's going to be much better to talk to younger people, under 40, under 50, and I think maybe older people need to be communicated with in a different way. But yeah, I mean, the world is full of pretty mediocre communication at the moment. I think everyone's talking at the moment about that email that they're getting from the company that they haven't heard from in 5 years, just with some really pointless kind of communication about how they're still open or they're not open anymore. We really, whatever the delivery method, we just have to make sure that you've got that foundational story, you're working off that, you're clearly stating what your values are, you're existing in that kind of sphere of we, and also you're not just trying to just give the bare minimum to get through this. And I think that's another really important point for businesses. There's a real tendency in this kind of situation, because everyone is fearful, and I'm a little bit uncertain about my business. I know a lot of other people are about how it's going to impact on them, and the emotional response to that is often to become smaller and to really just go into risk mitigation and to say, what are the messages that just kind of keep me out of trouble, make sure no one gets upset with me, just gets me through this. And I guess my advice to people would be to really come into it with, a much more wholehearted approach, which says, I'm going to be really clear with my customers or my audience. I'm going to really be clear about my values. And I'm going to, try to be positive as well, because that's the other thing. When people are scared, they are really going to gravitate to a brand or a business which is injecting, hope and positivity into this situation. And you can do that without being disingenuous or being flippant. But if you're remaining optimistic, positive, then you're gonna stand out from the pack as well, and you're gonna be a shining light for your customers as they're really struggling with all the uncertainty and all the difficulties in the world at the moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Tone of voice is so critical, and there's it's a personal thing, and getting it right can be quite difficult. But I think the thing is as you say, if you're always thinking about your audience, you don't want to just fall back into the templated type of communication with jargon and buzzwords. You want to make it from the heart. And I think as we go through further down the track, I think communications today, this week versus next week, is going to be very different as well. And I think at some point our tone of voice will change, and we'll, a little bit more upbeat after people have been sort of through this for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, things really turned around for me in terms of just, feeling a bit of that uncertainty. And I had a client who is probably, out of all the people that I am helping at the moment, is probably the person I thought was most likely to just shelve I'm doing a bit of branding storytelling work for him. He's in retail, and I was absolutely certain that he would pull the pin, just because he was about to shut up shop, and he has more to lose than most of us. He has thousands of dollars worth of stock sitting on the shelves that he can't sell anymore because he's not open. And I called him up, and he was like, this is actually the perfect time for me to do this work and really get my story straight, and actually have some quiet time to think about my story, think about how I'm expressed into the world, think about how I express my values and my offering, and let's just get cracking. And so that was really heartening as a fellow business owner, that somebody else was going into this in a really positive way, but really just a reminder that this stuff is important, and this stuff is actually going to really equip businesses well as we come out of this. If they are equipped with a really strong story and a brand and a group of customers or people who feel like that company has been there, has been true to itself, has expressed itself well, has been open and honest and authentic in the way that it's communicated through this, you'll have people for life coming out of this.
Yeah, terrific. Now, that's good advice. It's one of those things where, when the natural tendency is to go into your shell is to, yes, be aware of the circumstances, but, life goes on. Businesses need to keep going, and it doesn't mean it's out there sell, sale. I mean, part of building a brand is about that ongoing communication and delivering value over and above your products and services. So it's, when we look at it in that way, over coming weeks, it'd be good to be able to see that businesses are still, going back, creating the content, getting out on social media, and trying to get a little bit of normality back to it. But again, doing it in a way that delivers value. Thanks very much for your time, Ben. Where can people find you?
Just go to www.firesideagency.com.au.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.